talking of artists that are completely sort of, unafraid to embrace, ambition and reaching for something huge and massively kind of, over ambitious in that sense. I want to talk about this album. Now, originally on my 1973 list, I had the Hall & Oates album, Abandoned Luncheonette, which I love that record. It's what I think we might refer to as kind of blue-eyed soul, white men making soul music, but bringing in influences that perhaps only white men would bring in. And this is an example of a record like that. And it's Todd Rundgren, A Wizard, a True Star. Now, Todd actually produced Hall & Oates later in the 70s, and it makes perfect sense that he would do that, because I think he has much in common with their interest in soul music and singer-songwriter music. But there's so much more in this album. This album is completely off its trolley, isn't it? It's got psychedelia, it's got jazz, it's got musique concrète, it's got progressive rock, it's got balladry, it's all there, isn't it? It's got rock and roll in it. This is Todd in his home, basically setting up his home studio and doing whatever the fuck he wants. And sonically, it sounds like shit. I mean, it's got one of the worst drum sounds I've ever heard in my life on it. On one of the most beautifully sublime tracks, Zen Archer, the drum sound is horrendous, but it's almost so good you kind of overlook it. And of course, that first side is very much taking its lead from side 2 of Abbey Road, the idea of a series of interlocking pieces, fragments, some of which are barely a minute long, and weaving them into this incredibly diverse and eclectic kind of patchwork of music. So what do you think of this album, Tim?
I love its fearlessness, and I also love the fact that it's incredibly dense and eclectic, but what ties it all together is his wonderful facility for a melody.
Yeah.
And that is the thing, that at this stage in his career, Todd, a bit like Paul McCartney, however experimental he gets, he manages to make this quite communicative, quite accessible, quite beautiful. And Zen Archer, as you say, is perhaps the pinnacle on the album. It's a tremendous piece of music. And yes, it's pulling in influences from anything. Return to Forever, yes, Smokey Robinson, Laura Nyro. It's all put together in a distinctively Todd way.
I think, like you say, whatever he does, it comes out sounding like 100% Todd, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what he's seen. He's like a magpie. He's borrowing from all these different genres, but it just sounds like him. And it is the sound of someone, and we come back to this time and time again when we talk about some of these albums. It's the sound of someone who doesn't give a fuck about what people think he should be doing, record companies and fans alike. But the other thing about this record, one of the other great ironies, of course, is that he became known as a producer. In fact, I think he was already known he was pretty well established already as a producer. For a producer to make such a horrendous sounding record is not the best calling card. But I guess he was one of those producers that had ideas. So he was an ideas man rather than a kind of sonic alchemist. He was more about the idea.
Yeah, we've often discussed this. For me, the role of the producer is very much ideas. It's helping out with arrangements. It's helping out with the direction of the music. Brian Eno is a great example of that, where technically, I'm not sure he's particularly gifted. But in terms of ideas, he's superlative.
I think you're right, and I think a lot of people have kind of got those things confused over the years. I think because both of us grew up in the era of the 80s when people like Trevor Horn were at a peak, we now sometimes think producers and the sonics of a record are kind of synonymous, and they're not, are they? Producers, as you kind of pointed out, the producer was there to give ideas and to get the song arrangement into shape and come up with ideas for the arrangement. Yeah.
To get the best performance out of an artist, for me, a producer is there listening to what's being played, how it's being played, and then telling them what could be improved upon. So it's actually having the ears for the overall project.
And Todd is certainly someone that was absolutely full of ideas at this time. I mean, there's arguably too many ideas on this record.